Kangana Ranaut is back in the headlines, and this time it's not for a film, it's not for a speech in parliament, it's a public exchange of insults with CJP spokesperson Saurav Das. And what began as her criticism of the Cockroach Janata Party protest has escalated into personal attacks and social media exchanges. It's gotten reactions from all over the country. And the debate is now less about the actual politics and the protest and the mudda on hand, and more about the tone of our public discourse and what has happened to it. In this video, I'm going to examine what these two individuals actually said to each other, of each other, and why I believe that it was not okay on either side. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and we're going to get started. Let's first take a look at what Kangana Ranaut did, right? Starting the 28th of July, which is 2 days ago, she uploaded a series of Instagram stories on her Instagram reacting to the videos from the protest. And she objected to abusive language. And some of the stuff she said was really, she said, westernized Indian women, I call them generation gutter. Some of them have nothing to offer. They're not good at their studies, and they're so ugly and corrupt that they can't be homemakers. She also said either they proudly flaunt their freedom, having drugs, drinks, and endless body counts, shamelessly living off their parents, constantly fight to live independent lives, or actually being independent. And she calls them gutter chalk. And there's another one in which she said, अगर तुम पब्लिक प्रॉपर्टी डैमेज करोगे तो पब्लिक भी तुमको डैमेज करेगी. Every action has the equal opposite reaction. She then went on to say things like feminazi. So basically, you're not good at your studies, you're too ugly to be a homemaker. What does too ugly to be a homemaker mean? It means effectively that you're not attractive enough to find a husband. That's pretty patriarchal. The controversy didn't start there, though. While the protests were on, she made a statement outside of parliament in which she said the government shouldn't be arm twisted into removing ministers because of protests. She said basically, it is up to the government to decide who occupies what position, and parliament is the place for constitutional process. We should have discussions in parliament and not out on the street. Now, this is political and important. We shouldn't brush it off saying that she's just an actor or she's not important, because she is a democratically elected member of parliament who represents the Mandi constituency. And so you can't say that, we shouldn't take Bollywood opinions seriously. This is not a Bollywood opinion. This is a member of parliament. Now, there was someone asked Saurav Das on camera to respond. He's a member of the CJP. He said, even her own party doesn't take her seriously. Why should we? And then in humor, he said, and I quote, one of my friends said, maybe she's after me because I look a little like a young Hrithik Roshan. And obviously, that reference to Hrithik Roshan is a reference to Kangana and Hrithik's long public dispute that was part of their personal life. Saurav Das went on to say the problem in this country is that people don't talk and they don't debate anymore. Debates have been reduced to this. We should speak to each other respectfully. These don't sound like the words of someone who's mentally stable. Before speaking about the country's future generation, you cannot insult people like this. Of course, Kangana responded. She called Saurav Das useless because she said at the age of 28, when she was his age, she had already won national awards and she had a very successful career, but Das has achieved very little. And, she went on to make personal comments in this matter. Sonu Sood actually stepped in at this point, and his response was, I think it's very shameful if she said that. It should not be said. Young people are the ones who make actors. Basically, you'll only be successful if these young people come to the theatres and watch your film. Immediately after that, Kangana clarified. And Ms. Ranaut put out another Instagram video in which she explained what she meant. And she said she was not talking about an entire generation. She was just talking about a few people whom she calls gutter chap, unethic, ashleel behavior, which is being normalized. She said, we don't accept this. We don't teach our children this. Excuse me, will you teach your daughter like this? I have always supported Gen Z, she says, but there are some women who are feminazis who think that discipline and maryada is a choice. Then she goes on to say Samvidhan, and then she says this sexual galia and offending the Prime Minister can hurt everyone's feelings. And she goes on to remind people that you're ruining your life. Your workplace will fire you if you make statements like this. This is a dead end for you. Her argument was that if parents themselves don't encourage this sort of language, they should object to them speaking like this publicly. She maintained her criticism was directed at the behavior and not the entire generation. And many argue that her original posts have gone far beyond condemning language and basically saying things like generation gutter did not go down well. All right, so this is what has been said. And this is my take, right, from here onwards. Firstly, to Saurav Das, who's a spokesperson of the CJP. Using a woman's private life, her personal life, against her in a political debate is in very poor form. You know that. It's not okay. It's just, I mean, I don't have to, it's just not okay. Kangana Ranaut is a member of parliament. She is fully aware of what the law is like in our country. She seems to be fully aware of the constitution. Rebutting her 3 or 4 points should actually not be that difficult. You don't need to draw on her personal life. Let me show you how it's done. Number one, her first statement, the fact that government should not be arm twisted using protest, right? So protest in our country is a constitutional right. Article 19(1)(a) gives us freedom of speech and expression. Article 19(1)(b), right to assemble peacefully without arms. Citizens are therefore enshrined in our constitution, entitled to organize protests and persuade the government to change policy and demand accountability. Parliament doesn't have a monopoly on accountability. So she says you should come to Parliament is where we will have the debate. But what happens if Parliament doesn't function? So where can we as citizens actually dissent? Obviously Parliament, then the courts, through elections, through media. Are you counting how many of these are working? Public opinion, peaceful protest. Peaceful protest apparently is still working, and peaceful protest, as long as it is peaceful, fully within the rights of every single citizen of this country. Secondly, democracies have changed constantly through history because of peaceful protest. I mean, think of Nelson Mandela and, the fight against the apartheid, in South Africa. Think of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in America. And hey, where did they get those ideas from? Mahatma Gandhi and the independence movement in India. If you can't think back that far, India's anti-corruption movement with Anna Hazare, 2011, the Nirbhaya protests of 2012, the farmers' protest of 2020-2021, all changed policy and laws based on protest by citizens, fully democratical. Ministers resign for political reasons all the time. Ministers are pressured for political reasons to resign all the time. In fact, the largest number of resignations came during UPA 2, pressured by the BJP NDA, who was sitting in opposition at that time. Parliament itself, in many cases, acts only after there is protest, major scams, social movement, public tragedy, media investigations. It's only when the public puts pressure that Parliament tends to react. So, yes, Parliament ideally should work best, but it's not the only place where we can get our justice and our change. Parliament, court, media, public discourse. And finally, remember, the Supreme Court itself has recognized peaceful protest as part of our democratic process. The Ramlila Maidan case of 2012, the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan case of 2018. There are many established answers to why peaceful protest is part of our process. Then, to the next comment, the idea of feminazi women who basically want to use whatever language they want and are asking for the right to use whatever language they want in their dissent, not conforming to the patriarchy's idea of what is demure and sushil and what kind of girls should get married and have jobs and please their parents. And I'm saying patriarchy because nobody asks these things of boys or of men. And I find it ironic because the person I'm going to quote here is Kangana Ranaut herself, who has for years built a public image around resisting being judged as a woman, around resisting justifying her relationship, speaking too bluntly, fitting into Bollywood. And I'll give you a quote, September 2017 in Aapki Adalat. She said, "Why should I be ashamed of my past? I have no regret." She said, women are judged unfairly because of their relationships, while men are not. And she rejected the idea that a woman's credibility depends on her being silent. In the same interview, she defended her decision to speak publicly about powerful men. February 2017, she said basically women who express strong opinions are often labeled difficult and crazy, whereas men who display the same behavior are called confident and assertive. After the film Queen in 2014, she basically said that she refuses to make herself, fit industry expectations to satisfy commentators and the industry, and she will choose to look and be however she chooses. She's also supported women coming out during the Me Too movement and said women should be heard and they should be believed. But I also want to focus on the idea of bad language, and this has come up a lot during this protest where people have asked, why is there such bad language being used? And take a put a pin in that. I want to quote Anil Teltumble, who said, bad language, transgressive language, insults directed upwards becomes a symbolic act of insubordination, stripping authority of the reverence that much of its power depends on. So there's a difference when you punch up or when you punch down. Punching down, for example, is when someone powerful in a position of great power insults someone they consider weaker than them. So, for example, calling people cockroaches, or the literal translation of that would be kide makode, is obviously assuming that there are a group of people who are less than you. Punching upwards, according to Anil Tendulkar, is when someone who is obviously weaker or someone who is obviously not as powerful as their opponent uses transgressive language to strip that opponent of the power they have clothed themselves on. And this is an argument I'm presenting before you. Let's ask this question. If we are saying that Gen Z has become so comfortable using harsh language in political debate, let's ask where they have learned this language from. Could it be that this generation has been raised for the last several years in an environment that is increasingly coarse? I mean, let's look around, right? We have politicians who are constantly trading insults. We've got TV debates that have turned into shouting matches, social media where trolls use the worst possible language, especially for women in public life. I mean, look at the comments in my comment section on many days. This is, I'm sure, something that Ms. Kangana Ranaut has herself experienced. Abusive hashtags, personal attacks, repeatedly being called things like, euphemisms for prostitution, euphemisms for someone who should be raped, who would enjoy rape, someone who should be raped repeatedly by several people. This is the sort of environment that we have raised an entire generation at. And I'm saying we because we should have been more responsible for it. I want to give a small example of Ramesh Biduri, who is a member of parliament who used terrible language on the floor of the House of Parliament, and trolls who use terrible language on a daily basis. None of this excuses abusive behavior. But remember, young people don't invent the culture that they inherit, they absorb the culture that they inherit. So we have built a universe around them that is coarse and it's abusive. And this is the language that they hear people use all the time. Adults have normalized this language. And I'm not saying any one person needs to take blame for it, but this is what our films sound like. This is what our cricket field sounds like. This is what our television studios sound like. This is what parliament sounds like. So we've normalized it ourselves, and young people are often mirrors of society that raises them. And I think that if, everyone past the age of 40 is clutching their pearls to say, oh my God, how can they say that? Maybe take a minute to look inwards as to where this all came from and why we live in such a toxic society and why we are okay with the toxicity as long as it suits our purpose. And as soon as it's on the other side, suddenly it's not acceptable. I think that there are many questions that we have to ask ourselves as a society. I believe that Ms. Ranaut's criticisms are completely off the mark from the point of view of our democracy. And I also believe that Mr. Saurav Das's responses were not dignified at all. And this is something he needs to look inwards about as well. Leave me a comment in the comment section if you believe that bad language has now become part of the way we live in India.